Let's kick off today's programme with the latest from Holyrood in Edinburgh. Nicola Sturgeon is facing MSPs the first time since her shock resignation. Let's just cross to Edinburgh.
This new information, which we are publishing today, reveals that a patient in the Borders waited 49 hours to be treated in accident and emergency. Someone in Lanarkshire waited 54 hours. And a patient in Ayrshire waited 60 hours at accident and emergency. First Minister, that is 2.5 days in accident and emergency. Surely no one can defend that. So doesn't this confirm that Hamza Yusuf isn't even up to the job he's got at the moment?
First Minister.
Firstly, Presiding Officer, can I also take the opportunity to mark what will be tomorrow the first anniversary of Russia's illegal, unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, and to express my solidarity, the Scottish Government's continuing solidarity, and I'm sure the solidarity of everyone in Scotland with the people of Ukraine as they continue to defend and protect their sovereignty, their territorial integrity and their independence. Parliament this afternoon will debate this issue. This evening I will host a reception in Bute House for Ukrainians in Scotland, and our thoughts remain with them at this difficult time for them and their country. On the issues of the National Health Service, firstly I should say it is of course for the members of my party to elect a new leader of the SNP and effectively a new First Minister for Scotland, subject to approval of this Parliament. But can I say in relation to the Health Secretary, he is the only Health Secretary anywhere in the UK that has managed to avoid a single day of strikes in the National Health Service over this period. Secondly, notwithstanding the very significant challenges in accident and emergency.
Thank you. I would be grateful, members, if we could hear the First Minister. Thank you.
I can understand why the Conservatives are feeling uncomfortable. Of course, the Conservative government in England has not managed to avoid strikes in the National Health Service there. They also get uncomfortable when they hear me point out again that despite the very significant challenges in our National Health Service, which I'll come on to in a moment, Scotland's accident and emergency departments remain the best performing anywhere in the UK. And if I may say to the Health Secretary, that's not down to him, that's down to the hard work of staff across our National Health Service each and every single day. But our Health Service faces significant issues. We see that in the Audit Scotland report published today. But we also see in that Audit Scotland report important context that, of course, Douglas Ross always seeks to deny. So let me quote from it. Page 7, the pandemic continues to affect the delivery of NHS services. To listen to Douglas Ross and others, you would be forgiven for thinking the pandemic hadn't even happened. Secondly, Scotland's NHS is not alone in facing these issues. Many of the factors contributing to the extremely difficult situation facing the NHS in Scotland are not specific to health services, and many are not within the control of the Scottish Government. Notwithstanding that, we continue to support our health service to ensure record funding, record staffing, record pay deal for Agenda for Change staff in Scotland, and progress in reducing the longest waits in our National Health Service.
Douglas Ross.
Shameful. Shameful is the only way you could describe that answer from the First Minister, because not a mention of a patient who waited in Ayrshire at the tail end of last year for 2.5 days in accident and emergency. The clue is in the name. They went there for emergency treatment and they sat for 2.5 days. And the First Minister, her answer to them is, well, it's the best performing anywhere in the United Kingdom. That is little comfort for people who are waiting hours and days for treatment. And the First Minister might not have noticed, but when I sat down raising these shocking statistics, Humza Yousaf smiled and smirked. The Health Secretary thinks it's funny that people are waiting for days to be seen in A&E in Scotland. And the First Minister mentioned and quoted from the NHS Audit Scotland report into NHS. Let's remember, BMA Scotland said of the report this morning it is damning of the state of the NHS currently. The report outlines that Nicola Sturgeon's chosen successor won't meet NHS job targets. It says performance declined further in 2022. The number of people experiencing extremely long waits increased in 2022, and performance on cancer waiting times is getting worse. Every part of Scotland's NHS is in crisis because of Humza Yousaf. So can the First Minister tell us, is this useless Health Secretary really the best the SNP have to offer?
First Minister.
Well, in relation to individual cases, it is always unacceptable if someone waits too long for treatment in the National Health Service. And at the tail end of last year, which of course was Douglas Ross's phrase, that was during the winter peak of pressure. Since then, in accident emergencies, there is still considerable progress to be made, let me stress that, but we've seen 8-hour and 12-hour waits reduce, and we continue to support our accident emergency departments in further progress. We are also seeing, Douglas Ross mentioned recruitment, we have record numbers of staff in our NHS right now. Since this government took office, we have increased NHS staffing by 28,800 people within the National Health Service. We've got higher staffing per head of population than in England or other parts of the UK. We've got funding that has doubled in our National Health Service. We've got higher funding proportionately than anywhere else in the UK, to the tune proportionately of about £1.8 billion, equivalent to 44,000 nurses in our National Health Service. And yes, we have significant work to do to reduce waiting times. We are focused firstly on the longest waits, and we've seen significant progress in reducing the longest waits. But the reason I did make the comparison, and do make the comparison with other parts of the UK, is because Douglas Ross stands here and tells us and asks people to believe that these problems are unique to Scotland and somehow down to the Health Secretary in Scotland. And that's where the Audit Scotland report is instructive, because it says that these issues are not unique to Scotland. I'm quoting from page 7. Scotland's NHS is not alone in facing these issues, and many of the factors are out with the control of the Scottish Government. So
this is Nicola Sturgeon, current First Minister. Of course, she has resigned, hence the leadership race to lead the SNP and to become new First Minister.